It's got too much inflammation and not enough intelligence is what it's got, basically.
So the more depleted your biome is across the board, the less discerning or discriminating that the immune system tends to be.
Yeah, it goes back to something you said earlier. There's convergent evolution, for example, with the eye. So we know that flatworms and roundworms, cestodes and nematodes, they've sort of converged to learn how to live in the gut, and they kind of do the same things to our guts, even though they're they're just as different as bats and birds. Well, they're even way more different than that. So they're really different phylogenetically. So those two kinds of worms do similar things to modulate our immune system, and they do a lot of fine tuning that we really have found that we need, because without that fine tuning, you have this laundry list of basically, let's call it paranoid immune system problems, where you're reacting to harmless things in the environment, or you're reacting to harmless things in your own body, creating allergies and autoimmune disease. And of course, you can start having bad reactions to your own bacteria, creating inflammatory diseases of the gut.
So, before, I don't know, before roughly the 19th century, people just really not have food allergies and pollen allergies and stuff like that.
Yeah, as far as we can tell, that is correct.
Yeah, so that is really it's a new thing, and it seems very much to be tied with this hygiene hypothesis, as it's called.
Well, so the hygiene hypothesis, that's sort of where immunologists got in the picture. And there's looking back historically, and with hindsight, you can say, well, that may not have been. The guys in 1970 were not immunologists, but I talked to Brian Greenwood. He's the one that figured this out in 1968. He boots on the ground in Africa. He was a brand new doctor, and he said he was looking, do they really have rheumatoid arthritis? Do they have these diseases that we have in the UK? And the answer was, he found out no. And they sort of intuitively knew the big difference was these things that they were labeling as parasites, which are not all parasites, but that's how they had them labeled. So that was sort of intuitively obvious. That was in 1970, but then 20 years later, everything sort of they basically forgot what had been learned, and they came up with a hygiene hypothesis, even though so going from a conclusion in 1970, and they back translated this quickly into rodents and showed, yep, it works. It works. You can cure, there's a model of lupus that in Duke they work with to this day, and it was shown you can resolve that problem by putting in an intestinal worm. And they didn't use intestinal worms; they were using a malaria-like organism. But the bottom line was, you use these larger symbionts, and you can resolve the problem. But by 1989, when David Strachan, who actually gets credit for the hygiene hypothesis, came out with a more modern version of that, they had already moved from, this is our conclusion, this is what's doing it, to, it's a step backwards to a hypothesis, which is an educated guess, right? So you move from a conclusion, we got it, we nailed it, to a hypothesis, and it was probably until 2004 or 5 before really we got back on track saying, okay. It's not these chronic infections, these viruses that we're passing around that have become more prevalent in modern society. It's these ancient symbiotes that we've lost because of toilets and clean drinking water, and because we wear shoes, and because we have refrigerators that keep rats out, and so on and so forth. That's really the problem. It's historically, it's really interesting how they had it figured out, and then they sort of lost it and came up with a hygiene hypothesis. And then eventually they got back to where they were in 1970.
So there's examples where you can treat a condition by giving someone what we think of as a bug.
Well, you got to be careful. The microbiologists hate it when you refer to bacteria as a bug. So,
right.